Today, we're doing something a little different in this explainer. We're stepping away from the bright lights of modern history and, well, descending into a rather esoteric archive. We're going to examine the life of a profoundly unconventional spiritual figure. Exactly. And as we piece together these historical fragments, we're really going to ask you to set aside your traditional definitions of what it actually means to be holy. We're looking at a forgotten mystery here, a narrative that really challenges the very boundaries of devotion, and perhaps madness. The historical texts we're looking at set a striking, honestly almost jarring scene right from the start. A saint who lived among funeral pyres and shared his meals with wild dogs.
It is a shocking juxtaposition, isn't it? I mean, when we think of saints, we usually picture pristine temples, quiet ashrams, figures wrapped in perfectly pure white robes. But these records, they present us with something entirely different. A figure immersed in the literal ashes of death, finding the divine in the very places society fears most.
But before the legend, there was simply a boy. His name was Bamacharan, born in the quiet village of Atla.
Right, and he was born into a family of weavers, yet the texts note this profound indifference to the material world from his earliest days. While his family focused on the rhythmic clatter of the loom, tying those threads of mundane existence, Bamacharan's eyes were perpetually searching the horizon. He was just a natural seeker, drawn to the silent riverbanks and the deep, shadowed forests, entirely uninterested in the traditional life expected of him.
And that innate pull, it eventually drew him to a place most people would absolutely avoid. The Maha-Smashan of Terapith, the great cremation ground. Try to really picture the sensory reality of Terapith during that era. It was a landscape defined by the constant thick smoke of funeral pyres, the ash falling almost like snow, and these haunting, chanting winds. And right there, under an ancient tree in the center of all this profound mortality, Bamacharan settled. To the rest of the world, it was a place of terror, but to him, it was finally home.
It was actually right there, within the ashes of the cremation ground, that his whole identity began to shift. The boy from Atla faded away, and what emerged was a figure the locals cautiously referred to as the Mad Saint.
He defied absolutely all social and religious norms. His appearance, his habits, his entire way of moving through the world, it was all completely stripped of convention. His sole purpose, according to the records, was to remain as close as possible to the Divine Mother, Goddess Tara, whose presence he felt so intensely in the Maha-Smashan.
But madness is, well, it's often just a label we put on things we don't fully comprehend, right? As his spiritual presence intensified, his followers recognized something much, much deeper. They began to call him Bomdev, the living Shiva. And this wasn't just some affectionate nickname. It was a profound theological recognition. They observed his fierce, unpredictable nature and his total, absolute detachment from worldly concerns. To the observers out there in the cremation grounds, these were the literal qualities of Lord Shiva himself. They truly believed they were walking alongside a living embodiment of the deity. The historical record brings us to a truly defining and frankly scandalous incident. On one hand, you had the Orthodox priests of the local temple, and on the other, you had Bomdev.
The event occurred during a sacred offering of food meant for the goddess. Now, the priests adhered to strict ancient rituals of purity, but Bomdev, he bypassed those rituals entirely. He took the sacred food and simply sat down to share it directly with the stray dogs roaming the cremation grounds. As you can imagine, the priests were absolutely scandalized by what they saw as a sheer desecration.
But if we pause and look at what this action actually represented, it wasn't just rebellion for the sake of rebellion. It was non-duality in action.
Exactly. Bamdev saw right past the illusions of human hierarchy. If the Divine Mother is truly in everything, every leaf, every breath, every creature, then there is simply no such thing as an unclean being. Sharing a sacred meal with wild dogs was a living, breathing demonstration of this philosophy. This singular event forever solidified his reputation as a master who viewed the world entirely through the eyes of the divine.
Which brings us to another fascinating aspect of our archive, his relationship with the deity herself. To really understand it, we have to grasp the concept of Abhiman, which is essentially the stubborn, demanding, and fiercely intimate love of a child towards its mother.
Yes, because Bomdev did not approach the stone idol of goddess Tara with a bowed head and whispered, formal prayers. Not at all. He treated her as a literal, biological mother. If he felt unheard, the historical texts describe him standing right there in the inner sanctum, shouting at the stone idol, demanding her attention with the raw, unfiltered emotional intensity of a child.
So his devotion was entirely unconventional. I mean, he completely ignored formal liturgy, spoke to stone as if it were family, shouted in sacred spaces, and stubbornly refused to eat until he palpably felt her presence. You can just imagine the historical tension this created. The Orthodox temple authorities, who were charged with maintaining order and traditional reverence, were completely baffled, and they grew increasingly frustrated by this raw, demanding, and entirely unfiltered devotion happening right inside their holiest sanctum.
Naturally, all of this tension inevitably reached a breaking point. First came a particularly intense outburst where Bamdev disrupted the sanctum's rituals.
In response to that, the priests enacted a strict temple ban. They literally cast the mad saint out of the temple grounds entirely. But the very night of his banishment, the historical narrative takes a rather supernatural turn. The local queen, who was the temple's primary royal patron, experienced a vivid, terrifying dream, which, by the next morning, led to his immediate reinstatement.
The specific details of the queen's dream are striking. As it's recorded, the goddess Tara appeared to the queen, but not in her usual regal splendor. She looked sorrowful and neglected.
The goddess delivered a chilling message to the royal patron. She said, "I cannot accept any offerings while my child is hungry and cast out." The divine had intervened directly, unequivocally taking the side of the mad saint over the orthodox purity of the priests.
The historical accounts describe this incredibly frantic scene the following morning. The queen, clearly shaken by the vision, hurried to Tarapith at first light.
She completely overruled the Orthodox priests. Not only was the ban lifted, but by royal decree, Bamdev was reinstated with the highest possible honors. The establishment was effectively forced to bow to the profound, unorthodox truth that Bamdev represented.
As we look at the later years of his life, his legacy somehow becomes even more mysterious. He seemed to live a life entirely devoid of human ego. It's true. The texts describe him sitting absolutely motionless, deeply entranced, even as violent monsoon storms raged all around him. He moved through the surrounding forests, interacting peacefully with wild animals who seemed to just sense his complete lack of malice or separation. To the end of his days, he remained a profound mystery, a living enigma in the ashes.
So, as we close this archive today, we want to leave you with a lingering thought. Is true wisdom really only found in pristine scriptures and silent, orderly temples? Or, as Bamdev's life suggests, is it sometimes found in the raw, burning reality of the cremation ground? Bamdev forces us to ask ourselves if we're only looking for enlightenment in all the comfortable places while completely ignoring the profound truths hidden in the ashes. Thank you for joining us on this explainer as we uncovered this historical journey.